borrow until you die strategy the IRS does not want you to know. The IRS sent me a letter once. Not an audit, just a polite inquiry asking if I understood what I was doing, because I legally paid zero taxes on $400,000 in real estate gains, and they wanted to make sure I knew exactly how I did it. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. There's a financial operating system the wealthy use every single day that lets them borrow millions, live like kings, and pass billions to their kids, completely tax-free. It's not illegal. It's not a scam. It's literally built into the tax code. But you were never taught it because the system needs you to stay an employee. Billionaires like Bezos and Musk don't sell their assets. They borrow against them. And when they die, their heirs inherit everything without paying a dime in capital gains tax. That's not luck. That's strategy. Stick around, because I'm about to show you the exact borrow until you die blueprint, and how you can start using it with just one property. If you're ready to stop funding the IRS and start keeping your wealth, hit subscribe and comment "Show me." Let's get into it. Here's the lie they've been feeding you since kindergarten. 1. The financial operating system you were never taught. Let me ask you something. You spent 12 years in school, right? Math, history, science, maybe some Shakespeare if you were unlucky. But did anyone ever sit you down and explain how the wealthy actually build wealth? How do taxes really work? How to use debt as a tool instead of a trap? Yeah, didn't think so. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The education system wasn't designed to teach you how to get rich. It was designed to teach you how to be a good employee. Show up on time, follow instructions, don't ask too many questions, and then do that for 40 years while the government takes a third of your paycheck before you even see it. Meanwhile, there's an entire financial operating system running in the background, completely legal, totally public, that the wealthy use every single day. And you've never even been told it exists. Think about it. You work hard, get a raise, feel good for about 5 minutes, until you realize your tax bracket just went up and you're actually taking home less per hour than before. You're on a hamster wheel, and the faster you run, the faster the wheel spins. You can't win this game because you don't even know you're playing the wrong game. There's this parable in the Bible about 3 servants given money by their master. 2 of them invested it, made it grow, and got rewarded. The third guy? He buried his money in the ground because he was scared. When the master came back, he took everything from that guy and gave it to the ones who already had more. Harsh, right? But here's the lesson. Whoever has will be given more, and whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken away. That's not just a Bible story, that's literally how the financial system works. It rewards people who know how to play the game and punishes people who don't even know there's a game being played. Here's what's happening. There are 2 completely different operating systems running side by side. Employee OS, work for money, get paid, taxes taken automatically, spend what's left, repeat until you're 65 and broke. Owner OS, own assets, assets generate income, use tax deductions to offset income, borrow against assets tax-free, use borrowed money to buy more assets, repeat until generationally wealthy. You can't hack Employee OS to get rich. It's not designed for that. You have to switch operating systems entirely. And the gateway? Assets, specifically income-producing assets that give you tax advantages. Here's your wake-up call. Look at your income sources right now. If 100% of your money comes from a W-2 paycheck, you're stuck in Employee OS. And no amount of hard work, overtime, or side hustles will change that until you own something that works for you while you sleep. There's an old Jewish story about a farmer who was asked, "Why don't you plow your own fields instead of hiring workers?" He smiled and said, "If I plow, I earn money by the hour. If I own the land and hire workers, the land earns money for me even when I'm sleeping." That's the difference. Employees trade time for money. Owners trade assets for time. And once you understand that, you can't unsee it. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people. 2. The tax code scam. Why W-2 employees always lose, because here's where it gets absolutely infuriating. The tax system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, just not for you. When you get your paycheck, the government's already taken its cut, right? It's called withholding. They don't even give you a chance to see that money. It's gone before it hits your account. You're left with whatever scraps remain, and then you get to file taxes and hope you get some of it back as a refund, like the government's doing you a favor by returning your own money interest-free after holding it for a year. Meanwhile, business owners and real estate investors, they get their income first, pay their expenses, invest in their businesses, and then calculate what they owe in taxes. Often that number is zero. Sometimes it's negative, meaning they get money back. Same country, same tax code, completely different games. You know what your tax deductions are as a W-2 employee? Maybe you get the standard deduction, about 13 grand. If you're lucky, you've got a mortgage, so you deduct the interest. That's it. That's your whole playbook. You're paying an effective tax rate of 25%, 30%, maybe 35% if you're doing well. And there's no escape hatch. But the moment you own a rental property, suddenly you've got depreciation, which is this beautiful thing where the IRS lets you pretend your property is losing value every year, even though it's actually going up in value, and you get to deduct that imaginary loss from your income. You've got business expenses, repairs, travel, home office, and meals with potential investors. You've got ways to defer taxes indefinitely through 1031 exchanges. The game completely changes. Here's the part that'll make you mad. The tax code was literally written by wealthy people, for wealthy people. Congress is full of millionaires who own businesses and real estate. You think they're writing laws to tax themselves? Come on. Benjamin Franklin said, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." But here's what he didn't tell you. Franklin himself used every loophole available to avoid paying property taxes his entire life. He knew the game. He played it. And he won. The system isn't rigged against you because you're unlucky. It's rigged against you because you're an employee. That's the category the tax code punishes most. Not because you're bad at your job, because you're playing in the wrong category. Here's your reality check. If you're a W-2 employee making $80,000 a year, you're probably paying $15,000 to $20,000 in taxes annually. That's money you'll never see again. But if you owned just one rental property that generated a $20,000 paper loss through depreciation, that loss could offset your W-2 income. Suddenly, your taxable income is $60,000 instead of $80,000. You just saved $4,000 to $5,000 in taxes, legally, just by owning something. One property. That's the difference between staying trapped and unlocking an entirely new financial operating system. There's a story about a carpenter who worked for the same company for 40 years, paid his taxes, saved what he could, retired with maybe $200,000 in the bank. His coworker bought one rental house in his 20s, lived frugally, bought another, then another. By retirement, he owned 5 properties free and clear, generating $5,000 a month in passive income. Same job, same salary, different outcomes. Why? One played employee OS. The other switched to owner OS. The tax system isn't broken. It's working perfectly, just not for employees. And the only way out is to stop being just an employee. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to lose everything. 3. Why the rich never sell. Because once you understand that tax trap, you need to understand the biggest mistake broke people make when they finally do get an asset. They sell it. Picture this. You scrape together every dollar you have, buy a rental property for $300,000. 5 years later, it's worth $500,000. You're sitting on a $200,000 gain. You're pumped. You sell it, thinking you just made the smartest move of your life. Congratulations, you just got destroyed. Here's what actually happened. The IRS shows up with their handout, capital gains tax, that's 15 to 20% on your profit. So that $200,000 gain, You're handing over $30,000 to $40,000 right off the top. Now you've got $460,000 in cash sitting in your bank account, getting eaten alive by inflation. And here's the kicker. You just reset your entire wealth-building journey back to square one. You've got cash, sure, but you no longer own an appreciating asset. You're back to being a buyer in a market that just got more expensive. You traded a money-printing machine for a pile of cash that's losing value every single day. The wealthy look at that scenario and laugh, because they would never sell. They do something most people don't even know is possible. They borrow against the asset instead. There's this teaching in the Jewish Talmud about wealth preservation. A student once asked Rabbi Hillel, "How do I become wealthy?" The rabbi pointed to a fruit tree and said, "Do you cut down the tree to eat the fruit? No, you pick the fruit and let the tree keep growing. Your assets are the tree. Income is the fruit. Foolish men cut down trees." That's exactly what selling is, cutting down your tree. Here's how the rich play it. That property is worth $500,000. They don't sell. They go to the bank and say, "I'd like to refinance." The bank appraises it, agrees it's worth $500,000, and offers to lend up to 75% of that value. That's $375,000. You use that to pay off your original $200,000 mortgage, and you walk away with $175,000 in cash. And here's the magic. That $175,000 is a loan, not income. The IRS doesn't tax loans. You just pulled out almost $200 grand tax-free. Your property is still in your name, still appreciating, still generating rental income. You haven't lost anything. You've unlocked liquidity without triggering a single taxable event. Now you take that $175,000 and use it as down payments on 2 or 3 more properties. Those properties generate cash flow and appreciation. And in 5 years, you do it all over again. Refinance, pull out equity, buy more assets, repeat. That's the invisible wealth machine. You're not grinding harder. You're using the same asset over and over again like an ATM that never runs out. Rockefeller was once asked, "How much money do you have?" He looked confused and said, "I don't count money, I count assets. Money comes and goes. Assets stay and multiply." The man understood something most people never will. Cash is temporary, assets are permanent, and selling assets is financial suicide. Here's your move. If you own property that's gone up in value, do not sell it. Call your bank or a mortgage broker this week and ask about a cash-out refinance or a HELOC, home equity line of credit. Get that equity working for you. Don't let it sit there doing nothing just because you're afraid of debt. The rich aren't afraid of debt. They're afraid of missed opportunities. But that's just the obvious part. And what I'm about to say is what makes the difference. 4. The real estate gateway. Because I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but I'm not rich. I can't just go buy real estate. And that's exactly the lie that keeps you stuck. You don't need to be rich to start. You need to start to become rich. And real estate is the most accessible gateway for regular people to enter the owner OS. Not stocks, not crypto, not some guru's course. Real estate. Here's why. Banks will literally give you 75 to 80% of the money you need to buy an asset that makes you money while you sleep. Show me another investment where someone hands you hundreds of thousands of dollars to get started. I'll wait. There's a story from ancient Babylon about a man named Arkad, the richest man in the city. Everyone asked him, "What's your secret?" And you know what his first investment was? Not gold, not a business. Land. He said, "A man's wealth is not in the coins he hoards, but in the income-producing assets he owns." That was 4,000 years ago. The game hasn't changed. Real estate is the cheat code because it gives you 5 different ways to win at once. 1. Cash flow. Your tenant pays rent every month. That rent covers your mortgage, and if you bought smart, puts money in your pocket. 2. Appreciation. Real estate goes up in value over time. Not every year, but over 10, 20 years. It's basically guaranteed. The average is 3 to 5% annually, but in good markets, way more. 3. Depreciation. The IRS lets you pretend the property is losing value every year, even though it's going up, and you deduct that loss from your taxes. It's literally a paper loss that saves you real money. 4. Leverage. You put down 20%, the bank puts down 80%, but you get 100% of the appreciation. If the property goes up $100,000, that's all yours, even though you only put in $40,000. That's a 250% return on your actual cash. Try getting that from a savings account. 5. Inflation hedge. Your mortgage payment is fixed, but rent goes up with inflation. Every year your income increases while your biggest expense stays the same. You're literally getting richer by doing nothing. No other investment gives you all 5 of those advantages at once. None. But I don't have $50,000 for a down payment. Okay, cool. FHA loans let you buy a primary residence with 3.5% down. That's $10,500 on a $300,000 house. Can't you afford $10,500? Then get a roommate, cut your expenses, sell stuff, and work overtime for 6 months. If you can't sacrifice for 6 months to change the next 30 years, that's a priority problem, not a money problem. Or try house hacking. Buy a duplex or a triplex, live in one unit, rent out the others. Their rent pays your mortgage. You're living for free while building equity. That's how regular people break into real estate. There's a couple who ate ramen noodles for 2 years to save $15,000 for a down payment. Everyone called them crazy. They bought a $200,000 house in 2010. Today, it's worth $450,000. It's paid off, and it's cash flowing $2,000 a month. They told me 2 years of ramen bought us 30 years of financial freedom. That's the trade. Sacrifice now or regret later. You don't need to be rich to start. You need to be committed. One property in the next 12 to 18 months. That's the goal. Not 10. Not a portfolio. Just one. Because one property is the door that unlocks everything else. You think you've understood everything? There's a detail that few people notice, but it's extremely important. 5. Pull cash without selling. Because here's the detail most people miss. Once you own that property, the equity sitting in it is just sitting there, doing nothing. It's like having a stack of cash buried in your backyard. You're rich on paper, but broke in real life. And that feeling is torture, isn't it? You know you've got $100,000, $200,000 in equity locked up in your house, but you can't pay bills with equity. You can't invest with equity. It's just trapped. Most people think they have 2 options. Sell the property and pay a massive tax bill, or keep the property and never touch that money. Both options suck. But the wealthy, they've got a third option you've probably never even considered. Warren Buffett famously said, "I never sell." People thought he was just being stubborn. But here's what he actually does. In 2020, Buffett borrowed $2 billion from Bank of America at 2% interest, using his Berkshire Hathaway stock as collateral. Why didn't he just sell some stock? Because selling would trigger a 20% capital gains tax. He'd lose $400 million immediately. Instead, he borrowed at 2%, paid basically nothing in interest compared to what his investments earn, and kept all his assets working for him. That's not a billionaire move. That's just understanding how debt works. Here's the trick. You can pull cash out of your property without selling it. There are 2 main tools. Cash out refinance. Let's say your house is worth $500,000 and you owe $200,000 on it. You go to the bank and say, "I'd like to refinance." They appraise it, confirm it's worth $500,000, and offer you a new loan at 75% loan to value. That's $375,000. You use that to pay off your old $200,000 mortgage, and boom, $175,000 cash in your pocket. Tax-free. Because it's a loan, not income. Your mortgage payment goes up a little, sure, but if it's a rental property, your tenant is covering it. And if it's your primary residence, that $175,000 can now be invested into assets that pay you back way more than the 6 or 7% interest you're paying. HELOC, home equity line of credit. This is like a credit card, but backed by your house. Let's say you've got $150,000 in equity. The bank gives you a line of credit for $100,000. You don't pay interest unless you actually use it. And when you do use it, you only pay interest on what you borrowed. It's flexible, it's fast, and it's there whenever you need it. Here's the math that'll blow your mind. If you borrow at 6% interest but invest that money into something earning 10 cents, another rental, a business, even a solid index fund, you're making a 4% profit on someone else's money. That's called arbitrage. That's how the rich get richer. I know a guy who owns 10 rental properties. Every 3 to 5 years he refinances all of them. Each time he pulls out $50,000 to $100,000 per property. That's $500,000 to $1 million in cash every cycle. He uses that cash to buy 3 to 5 more properties. Those properties appreciate and generate cash flow. Then he does it again. 20 years later, he owns 45 properties. He's never sold a single one. He's never paid capital gains tax on a single dollar of appreciation. And he's effectively living off borrowed money that his tenants are paying back for him. The man's a genius. But here's the thing. He's not doing anything you can't do. He just understands that debt, used correctly, isn't a burden. It's a tool. Maybe the most powerful tool in wealth building. So here's your action step. If you own property with equity, call a lender this week. Ask about cash-out refinance options or a HELOC. Run the numbers. If you can borrow at 6% and invest it into something returning 10% or more, that's free money. Don't leave it sitting there. Wait, the most important part is in the following story. 6. Borrow until you die. Because now we get to the part that sounds absolutely insane until you realize it's exactly what every billionaire does. Society has drilled into your head that debt is bad. Pay off your mortgage early. Be debt-free. Debt is slavery. And sure, if you're borrowing money to buy jet skis and handbags, yeah, that's dumb debt. But borrowing to buy assets? That's smart debt. And there's a massive difference. Here's what's wild. The richest people on earth are also the most in debt. Elon Musk, billions in loans. Jeff Bezos, billions in loans. They're not paying cash for their lifestyles. They're borrowing against their assets. And they're doing it on purpose. There's a twist on a Bible story I love. When Jesus flipped the tables in the temple, he wasn't mad at people for borrowing money. He was mad at predatory lenders exploiting the poor. But the Jewish merchants, they borrowed to expand their businesses, to create wealth. That was considered wisdom. Proverbs says, the borrower is slave to the lender. But that's only true if you're borrowing to consume. If you're borrowing to invest, you're not a slave. You're a strategist. Here's the borrow until you die strategy in plain English. You buy a property for $500,000 with 20% down. That's $100,000 out of pocket. 5 years later, it's worth $700,000. You refinance, pull out $150,000 tax-free. You use that $150,000 to put down payments on 2 or 3 more properties. Those properties generate cash flow and appreciation. 5 years later, you do it again. Refinance everything, pull out equity, buy more assets. You never sell, you never pay capital gains tax, you just keep borrowing and buying. And here's the kicker, the part that makes people's heads explode. When you die, your heirs inherit those properties with something called a step-up in basis. That means they inherit the property at its current market value, not what you originally paid. So if you bought a house for $200,000 and it's worth $1.2 million when you die, your kids inherit it at $1.2 million. If they sell it the next day, they pay 0 capital gains tax on that $1 million in appreciation. You just passed on $1 million in gains completely tax-free. So let's add it up. You never sold, so you never paid capital gains tax during your life. You borrowed against your property tax-free to fund your lifestyle. And when you died, your kids got everything without a tax bill. That entire lifetime of wealth building, decades of gains, and the IRS got nothing. That's not a loophole. That's the system working exactly as designed for people who understand it. There's a story about a 92-year-old woman who owned 18 rental properties and had $2.1 million in debt. Her grandson asked, "Grandma, why don't you pay off the debt? You could do it." She laughed and said, "Why would I? The bank loans me money at 5%, My properties earn 12%. I make 7% profit on their money. When I die, you'll inherit 18 properties with stepped-up basis. You sell 2 to pay off the debt if you want. You keep 16 free and clear. That's the gift. She died with millions in debt, and she died rich because she understood that dying with debt on income-producing assets isn't a failure, it's a strategy. Here's your mindset shift. Stop thinking good people pay off debt. Start thinking smart people use debt to buy assets that make them free. Debt on a car? Stupid. Debt on a vacation? Stupid. Debt on an asset that pays you every month and appreciates every year? That's not stupid. That's the game. Do you see anything unusual? The answer is right here. 7. Generational wealth cheat code. Because here's the unusual part that makes this whole strategy absolutely bulletproof. It's not just about you getting rich. It's about your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, never having to start from zero. Have you ever wondered how families like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Kennedys stay rich for generations? It's not because every single kid is some business genius. Half of them are mediocre at best, but they stay wealthy because they understand one thing most families don't. You don't sell the assets. Ever. There's a famous quote attributed to the Rothschild family. "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." Sounds dramatic, but here's the real secret they figured out 200 years ago. They don't sell assets across generations. They just transfer ownership. And the way the US tax code is written, that transfer is almost completely tax-free. Let me break this down because it's genuinely mind-blowing. Say you buy a house in 1990 for $200,000. Fast forward to today, it's worth $1.2 million. That's a $1 million gain. If you sell it, you're paying 15% to 20% capital gains tax on that $1 million profit. That's $150,000 to $200,000 gone, just like that. But what if you don't sell? What if you just hold it until you die? Here's where it gets wild. When you pass away, your kids inherit that property. And the IRS says, okay, for tax purposes, we're resetting the cost basis to the current market value. So instead of inheriting it at your original $200,000 purchase price, they inherit it at $1.2 million, the value on the day you died. That's called step up in basis. Now, if your kids turn around and sell it the next week for $1.2 million, their taxable gain is 0. They just inherited $1 million in appreciation, completely tax-free. You worked your whole life building that equity. You borrowed against it to fund your lifestyle. You never paid capital gains tax. And when you died, your kids got it all without a tax bill. That entire $1 million gain? The IRS never touched it. That's not a glitch. That's literally how the system is designed. Now combine that with the borrow until you die strategy. You're not selling properties during your lifetime. You're refinancing them and pulling cash out tax-free. You're living off borrowed money. Your properties keep appreciating, and when you die, everything gets a step up in basis, and your heirs basically start with a clean slate. There's a family in Japan that's owned the same piece of land in Tokyo for 5 generations. The first generation bought it in 1920 for the equivalent of $10,000. Today, it's worth over $50 million. Not a single generation has sold it. Not one. Every family meeting, they repeat the same rule. This land is not ours to sell. We are merely its guardians for the next generation. 5 generations. 0 capital gains taxes paid. $50 million in appreciation, completely untouched by the IRS. That's not luck. That's understanding the game. Here's your move. If you're over 50, you need to talk to an estate planning attorney and a CPA about this yesterday. Set up a trust or an LLC to hold your properties. Make sure your heirs understand the strategy, because if they panic sell everything after you're gone, they're throwing away decades of tax-free wealth building. The rule is simple. Build assets you never sell. Live off assets you borrow against. Die with assets that transfer tax-free. And it's in the next section that many people make mistakes without even knowing it. 8. Short-term rentals, the tax superweapon. Because up until now, everything I've said applies to long-term rentals. traditional buy and hold real estate. But what if I told you there's a specific type of property that lets W-2 employees, regular people with regular jobs, use these same strategies to pay almost zero taxes? You're probably thinking, yeah, right? This only works for rich people, and 5 years ago, you'd have been correct. But something changed. Recently, there was a tax law update. Some people call it the One Big Beautiful Bill, that brought back a massive tax advantage specifically for short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs, vacation rentals. Here's the deal. Normally, if you're a W-2 employee making $100,000 a year, you're paying $20,000 to $25,000 in federal taxes. There's no escape. You can't deduct your way out of it because the IRS treats rental properties as passive income, and passive losses can't offset your active W-2 income. That rule has trapped regular people for decades. But short-term rentals? If you materially participate, meaning you're actively involved in running the property, the IRS treats it as an active business, not a passive investment. And active business losses can offset your W-2 income. Translation: you can use real estate losses to wipe out your job income. Legally. Remember when Trump said, "I pay very little in taxes, that makes me smart"? People lost their minds. But he wasn't lying or cheating. He was using real estate depreciation to offset his income. And for years, only the wealthy could do this because they didn't have a W-2 income to worry about. But now, this door is open for regular employees, teachers, nurses, engineers, anyone. Here's how it works. You buy a short-term rental for $500,000. You hire a cost segregation specialist, costs about $3,000 to $5,000, and they break down your property into components. Appliances, flooring, landscaping, furniture, all that stuff depreciates faster than the building itself. With bonus depreciation rules, you can accelerate a huge chunk of that depreciation into year one. Let's say your cost segregation study shows $125,000 in accelerated depreciation in year one. You make $100,000 at your W-2 job. Your short-term rental has $125,000 paper loss. Your taxable income? $100,000 minus $125,000 equals negative $25,000. You just paid zero federal taxes, and you've got a $25,000 loss to carry forward to next year. The tax savings? Somewhere between $18,000 and $22,000 in year one alone. That's real money back in your pocket. Now here's where it gets crazy. You take that $18,000 to $22,000 in tax savings and use it as a down payment on your next property. Property number 2 generates more depreciation, more tax savings. You keep snowballing. There are a couple, both teachers combined income $120,000, who bought a cabin in the mountains for $400,000 in 2023. They did a cost segregation study. First year depreciation, $100,000. Their tax bill went from $22,000 to basically zero. Year 2, they used the money they saved to buy a second short-term rental. Now they own 3 properties, have $4,000 a month in cash flow, and still pay zero federal taxes. Same teaching jobs, same salaries, completely different financial reality. They told me, "We're making teacher money, but we're living like we have doctor money, without the doctor debt." That's the power of understanding the code. Here's your move. If you're a W-2 employee getting crushed by taxes, look into buying one short-term rental property. Make sure you materially participate. That means you're involved in management, marketing, and guest communication. Track your hours. Get a cost segregation study done. Work with a CPA who understands this strategy. The tax code rewards action. You don't need to be a millionaire. You just need one property and the knowledge to use it right. All of the above will be meaningless if you miss the last detail. 9. Compounding without friction. Because here's the last detail that ties everything together. And it's the difference between building wealth slowly versus building it exponentially. Every year you pay taxes, you're not just losing that money, you're losing what that money could have become. Think about it. If you're paying $20,000 a year in taxes for 30 years, that's $600,000 gone. But it's actually way worse than that, because if you had invested that $20,000 every year at a modest 8% return, it wouldn't be $600,000, it would be $2.5 million. The IRS didn't just take $600,000 from you, they took $2.5 million in potential wealth. That's your retirement, that's your kids' college funds, that's your financial freedom. And it's gone because you didn't know there was another way. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Money makes money, and the money that money makes money." That's compound interest. But here's what he didn't tell you. There's an enemy to compounding, and it's called taxes. If you're compounding with taxes, you're getting 20 to 30% shaved off your gains every single year. But if you compound without taxes, that's when things go nuclear. Here's the zero tax snowball in action. Year 1, you buy a short-term rental. Cost segregation creates a $20,000 paper loss. That offsets your W-2 taxes. You save $20,000 in taxes you would have paid. You take that $20,000 and use it as a down payment on property number 2. Year 2, property 1 is cash flowing. Property 2 generates another $25,000 in depreciation. You offset taxes again, save another $25,000. Plus, you've got cash flow from both properties now. You use the tax savings plus the cash flow to buy property 3. Year 3, 3 properties, more cash flow, more depreciation, more tax savings. You're not paying the IRS a dime, and every dollar you save goes right back into buying more assets. After 10 years, you own 7 to 10 properties. Your annual cash flow is $60,000 to $80,000. Your taxable income? Still zero, because depreciation is offsetting everything. Your net worth? Somewhere between $2 million and $3 million. And the total amount of taxes you paid over that decade? Close to nothing. Meanwhile, your coworker, same job, same salary, paid $200,000 in taxes over those 10 years and has maybe $100,000 saved in a 401k. Same starting point. Wildly different outcomes. I once heard a story about a guy who met Warren Buffett at a conference. He asked, "What's the secret to getting rich?" Buffett looked at him and said, 2 rules. Rule 1, don't lose money. Rule 2, don't forget Rule 1. The guy was confused. But everyone loses money sometimes. Buffett smiled. Taxes are a legal way to lose money. Learn how not to pay them and you've mastered Rule 1. That's not about cheating. It's about understanding that every dollar you keep is a dollar that compounds. And compounding without friction, without taxes bleeding you dry every year, is how ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. Here's your final move. Treat every dollar of tax savings like investment capital. Don't spend your refund. Don't blow the savings. Reinvest it immediately. The zero tax snowball only works if you keep feeding it. Wealth isn't built by earning more. It's built by keeping more. And the tax code literally gives you the blueprint to keep it all, if you know how to read it. So there it is, the borrow until you die strategy the wealthy have been using for generations. This isn't theory. This is the actual playbook. Buy assets, never sell them. Borrow against them tax-free, use that money to buy more assets, and when you die, your kids inherit everything with zero capital gains tax. It's not a loophole. It's the system working exactly as designed. Here's your move. Buy 1 property in the next 12 months. Just 1. That's your entry point into the owner OS. That's the door that changes everything. If this just shifted how you see money forever, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. I'm exposing more wealth strategies they don't teach you in school. Comment, "Borrow until I die" if you're ready to play the real game. And drop a number below. How many properties do you currently own? Even if it's 0, let me know. We all start somewhere. The IRS doesn't want you knowing this. Not because it's illegal, but because it works. Now you know. The question is, what are you going to do about it?